In a crowded New York restaurant, a man stood up to leave. He never made it outside. The room didn't erupt, it went quiet. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. People looked down instead of around. No one asked questions, they already understood. Ivankov didn't need loud displays. His reputation arrived before he did. People adjusted their behavior the moment his name entered a room. Deals were accepted faster. Resistance disappeared earlier. He brought a style of control that followed people into places they once considered safe. By the time authorities caught up to him, his influence had already crossed borders. Not through noise, but through certainty. A phone rang late at night. No threats. No raised voices. Just a short conversation that didn't explain anything. By morning, decisions had already been made. Ownership changed quietly. Agreements shifted without discussion. People didn't wait for consequences. They acted before they happened. That was the pressure. Mikhailov didn't rely on visible force. He relied on predictability. Everyone knew how things would end if they didn't comply. And once outcomes become predictable, resistance fades before it begins. Traffic moved normally through Moscow until one moment broke the rhythm. A car stopped at a light. Seconds later, the street exploded. The blast rolled through buildings, shattering glass, freezing movement. For a moment, no one reacted. People stood still, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. Timofeyev built power through open force. His end reflected the same logic. Nothing hidden, nothing subtle, just impact. And after that, the message didn't need explanation. Everyone understood how quickly normal life could disappear. In one country, a deal was made. In another, someone paid for it. Kalashov didn't need to be present. People felt the outcome without ever seeing him. A shipment disappeared. A business failed overnight. Someone stopped answering calls. No direct link. No clear cause. Just consequences that arrived without warning. That distance created something worse than fear. Uncertainty. Because when you don't know where it comes from, you don't know how to avoid it. A business opened like any other. Customers walked in. Orders were placed. Everything looked normal. But decisions weren't made inside that building anymore. Ownership had already shifted, quietly. The people working there understood it before it was ever said out loud. Nothing changed on the surface, but everything underneath had, and that's what made it dangerous. It didn't replace the system. It became it. The sound came first, not always loud, but enough to change how people moved. Cars slowed at intersections. People avoided certain streets without explaining why. The 1990s turned parts of Moscow into zones where routine no longer guaranteed safety. Events happened quickly, often without warning. People adapted fast, routes changed, habits changed, conversations became shorter. It wasn't about understanding everything, it was about avoiding being in the wrong place at the wrong time. A man walked the same route every day, same time, same pace. One morning, he didn't reach the corner. It happened quickly, almost unnoticed by those not paying attention. That was the shift. Violence became precise, planned, timed. People nearby often didn't understand what had happened until it was already over. That precision removed randomness, but made outcomes more certain. And certainty is harder to escape than chaos. A case was opened, then delayed, then reassigned, then it disappeared. No explanation, no conclusion. People inside the system noticed it, but stopped asking why. Because asking didn't change anything. And once questions stop, outcomes stop mattering. That's when the system doesn't fail. It stops being questioned. Files stopped moving, decisions slowed without reason, and outcomes quietly shifted direction. People adapted to the silence, learning that pushing further only created problems for themselves. Money moved through accounts that looked normal. Small transfers, routine activity, nothing unusual, until one account froze, then another. A business suddenly couldn't operate. Payments stopped without explanation. People didn't understand what went wrong, only that everything changed at once. By the time questions were asked, the trail had already moved. No noise, no warning, just control that worked without being seen. In a new city, nothing looked out of place. New faces, new language, same structure. A business partner changed. A deal stopped making sense. People couldn't explain it, but something felt different. Decisions no longer followed logic. They followed pressure no one could see. It didn't arrive loudly. It settled in, and once it settled, it became part of how things worked. A door closed behind him. Movement stopped, but nothing else did. Calls were still made. Decisions still reached outside. People followed instructions from someone they couldn't see. The location changed. The control didn't. And that revealed something important. It wasn't about where power was. It was about who still listened. Messages passed quietly through layers, reaching people who never questioned their source. And as long as those messages were followed, nothing truly stopped. It happened in places people thought were safe. Open spaces, daylight, ordinary moments. That's what made it effective. It wasn't random. It was placed, timed, designed to be seen. People didn't need explanations. They understood immediately. And once a message is understood that clearly, behavior changes without instruction. Someone saw something, but didn't say anything. Not because they didn't care, because they understood the cost. Over time, that silence spread. Conversations avoided certain topics. Questions stopped being asked. And once silence becomes shared, it reinforces everything around it. Because what isn't spoken can't be challenged. People lowered their voices, changed subjects mid-sentence, and learned to forget details that once felt important, because remembering them carried its own risk. There was no single target anymore, no leader to remove, no center to break. One connection disappeared, another replaced it. Nothing stopped, it shifted. People expecting collapse realized it didn't need to. Because it wasn't held together by one person. It was held together by repetition. And repetition doesn't break easily. Today, no one sees the full picture. Not because it's hidden, because it's everywhere. Patterns repeat. Decisions feel familiar. People act without questioning where those patterns came from. And that's what makes it different. It doesn't need to show power anymore, because by now most people already assume it's there. Different names, different roles, same pattern. What begins with individuals becomes something larger, not louder, but deeper. It changes how people act, how they decide, how they respond. And once behavior changes at that level, control no longer needs to be visible. Because the most effective systems don't force obedience. They make it automatic. Over time, that automatic behavior becomes normal. People stop noticing it. They stop questioning it. And when that happens, the system no longer feels imposed. It feels like reality itself. And the moment something feels like reality, it becomes almost impossible to separate yourself from it, even if you wanted to consciously walk away.